I am James Carter, a 32-year-old white American raised on the noisy yet vibrant streets of Atlanta, Georgia. If you asked me what shaped the man I am today, I would not hesitate to answer the years I spent behind the bar taught me that arrogance can push a person off a cliff, while humility can lift them to unimaginable heights. The story I'm about to tell is not just a memory, but a lesson deeply etched into me. It began in a luxurious hotel in downtown Atlanta in 2025 and ended in a small bar where I witnessed an arrogant man being brought down by his pride. Picture Atlanta on a summer evening in 2025. The city glows with lights, skyscrapers reflecting neon hues, and crowds pouring into restaurants, bars, and upscale hotels. Atlanta has always been where old meets new, wealth meets poverty, and a mosaic of ethnicities coexists with underlying tensions. As a bartender, I was used to observing people, from business people in expensive suits to street artists with burning dreams. I loved my job, not only for the cocktails I crafted, but because the bar was where stories were told, secrets were revealed, and sometimes life lessons were learned. I grew up in a middle-class family in the suburbs of Atlanta. My mother, Emily, was a chef at a local restaurant. She always taught me that the value of a person lies not in how much money they have, but in how they treat others. James would often say, "Whatever you do it with heart and respect." My retired postal worker father taught me patience and hard work. Those lessons led me to the craft of bartending, a profession I believe to be an art, the art of flavor storytelling and connection. As a young man, I dreamed of owning my bar, a place where everyone would be welcomed, no matter who they were. I watched bartending tutorials and experimented with spirits, herbs, and fruits to create unique cocktails. At 25, I won an award in a citywide mixology competition, and my name began to gain recognition. That's how I landed a job at the Grand Elite, a 5-star hotel owned by Edward Grayson, one of the most powerful businessmen in Atlanta. I thought it was my chance to get closer to my dream. But I had no idea that it would be in that very place where I'd face challenges not just in my career, but in my values and self-respect. The Grand Elite was the epitome of opulence. Located in the city's heart, the hotel featured marble-floored lobbies, million-dollar art pieces on the walls, and a team of staff trained to serve the wealthiest clientele. But behind that glamorous exterior lay a secret only the staff knew. Edward Grayson, the hotel owner, was a racist. He proudly proclaimed that the Grand Elite was reserved for high-class guests, a euphemism for wealthy white and socially elite patrons. People of color, even successful business people or renowned politicians, were often turned away with excuses like no vacancy or already reserved. As a white man, I wasn't directly affected, but every time I witnessed it, I felt a quiet discomfort growing inside me. I still remember my first day at the Grand Elite. I was led past the main bar, where expensive bottles lined sleek ebony shelves. The manager, a strict woman named Helen, told me, "James, you've got talent, but here talent is only half the job. You have to please Mr. Grayson." I nodded, thinking I would be recognized as long as I did my job well. But I soon realized that working for Grayson wasn't just about serving drinks, but about conforming to values I didn't believe in. While I was preparing an old-fashioned for a customer one evening, Grayson walked into the bar. He was tall, silver-haired, impeccably groomed, always in a tailored suit. He looked at me, gave a cold smile, and said, "You're the new guy, right? Remember here, we only serve those who deserve it." I didn't fully grasp the meaning of that sentence until a few days later, when I saw him order the front desk to reject a black couple under the excuse that the hotel was full. I stood behind the bar, gripping a bottle of whiskey, struggling to contain my anger. That was the first time I asked myself, How long can I work here? This story isn't just about me or Grayson. It's also about Sarah Thompson, a Black American woman who taught me the true meaning of humility and strength. Sarah owned a small bar called Harmony, where I found a new job and a new perspective on life. At Harmony, I witnessed Grayson, a man who looked down on others, be cornered by his arrogance in a way he would never forget. But to tell that story, I must begin at the Grand Elite, from when I was still an ambitious bartender, unaware that life was about to teach me a lesson I would carry forever. Come with me on this journey, where the lights of Atlanta will illuminate hidden truths, and a small bar becomes the stage for an unforgettable lesson. The Grand Elite Hotel stood tall in the heart of Atlanta, an untouchable symbol of luxury and power. In 2025, when James Carter began working there, I was overwhelmed by its grandeur. The vast marble-floored lobby, the glittering crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and the faint scent of expensive perfume drifting through the air created a world a guy from a middle-class suburb, had never imagined myself stepping into. But behind that dazzling glow was a grim truth. Grand Elite was not just a place for the elite. It was a stage for racism, cleverly masked by fake smiles and polite lies. The owner of Grand Elite was Edward Grayson, a 55-year-old businessman known throughout Atlanta as a real estate tycoon. Grayson was tall, silver-haired, and meticulously groomed, always dressed in bespoke suits from Italy. He walked with the air of a king, his piercing eyes sizing up everything around him. To Grayson, Grand Elite wasn't just a hotel. It was his private kingdom, where he alone decided who was worthy of entering and who was left outside. "We only serve those who deserve it," he often said. But I soon realized that in Grayson's dictionary, deserving meant white, wealthy, and well-connected to the elite. I still remember the first staff meeting at Grand Elite. Over 50 of us were packed into the conference room, from receptionists and housekeepers to bartenders like me. Grayson stepped up to the podium wearing a smug smile and declared, "Grand Elite is the pinnacle of Atlanta. We don't just compete with other hotels, we define class. However, we must be selective with our clientele to maintain that reputation." He emphasized the word selective with a loaded look. He then handed our manager, Helen, a list of unspoken rules. One of them was, if a guest of color tries to book a room, we are to say the hotel is complete, no matter the availability. I stood at the back of the room, a chill running down my spine. How could something so beautiful hide something so ugly? As a bartender, I worked mainly at the main bar, where I mixed cocktails for affluent guests. The Grand Elite's bar was a work of art: polished ebony shelves, rows of expensive whiskey and cognac bottles, and soft lighting from hanging lamps created a warm and luxurious space. Guests were often business magnates, politicians, or celebrities. They chatted about multi-million-dollar deals, bragged about European vacations, and sometimes left tips so large I had to count them twice. But no matter how much I tried to focus on the craft, Grayson's rules haunted me. While preparing a martini for a guest one evening, I heard a commotion at the front desk. Curious, I saw a well-dressed black man in a gray suit trying to check in. He spoke with a calm but firm voice. I called ahead and received confirmation that there was a room available. The receptionist, a young woman named Sophie, looked nervously toward Helen standing nearby. Helen stepped in, put on her professional smile, and said, "I'm sorry, sir. It appears there's been a misunderstanding. We are currently fully booked." The man furrowed his brow, clearly unconvinced, but nodded and left, not wanting to cause a scene. When I returned to the bar, Sophie passed by me and whispered, "James, did you see that I feel like I just lied?" I only shook my head, unsure of how to respond. Such incidents were not rare. Another time, I saw Grayson personally turn away, a black couple, affluent, carrying designer luggage, and exuding confidence. "No vacancy," Grayson said coldly, then turned to me with a wink, as if it were some joke. I felt my face flush with anger, but I simply bowed my head and continued wiping my glasses. As a white man, I didn't suffer from discrimination, but I couldn't help feeling ashamed to be part of such a system. Each time it happened, my mother's voice echoed in my mind: treat others with respect. But at Grand Elite, respect seemed reserved only for the chosen few. Grayson deemed worthy. Grayson didn't discriminate against guests. He treated his staff like tools. He often appeared at the bar criticizing our work in front of customers to assert his authority. One time, while I was demonstrating a flair technique for a group of guests, Grayson interrupted and loudly said, "You call that a cocktail? I pay you to do better than that, Carter." The guests chuckled, and I could only grit my teeth and force a smile. Moments like that made me question whether my dream of working in such a prestigious place was worth the cost of my self-respect. But not all staff stayed silent. Maria, a server, was the only one who dared speak openly about Grayson. One evening, as we were cleaning up the bar after closing, Maria sighed and said, "James, aren't you tired of this charade? Grayson thinks he owns the world, but is just a coward hiding behind his money." I looked at Maria, a Latina woman with bright, determined eyes, and nodded. "I can't stand it either," I admitted. "But what can we do?" Maria shrugged. "Maybe one day he'll meet someone who'll make him pay for it." Her words, though simple, planted a seed in my mind, a seed of change. This second part isn't just a story about Grand Elite or Edward Grayson. It's the beginning of my journey from an ambitious bartender to someone who would witness the downfall of arrogance. My time at Grand Elite tested my beliefs, but it also prepared me to meet Sarah Thompson, the black woman who would change how I viewed the world. Let's continue as the lights of Atlanta begin to reveal deeper secrets. I, James Carter, never imagined that a bar counter would become the place that shaped who I am. At 32 years old, standing in the heart of Atlanta in 2025, I carried a burning dream to own a small bar where everyone, regardless of background or skin color, would be welcomed with a cocktail that told their story. But at the Grand Elite Hotel, where I worked under the management of Edward Grayson, that dream felt increasingly out of reach. My days there didn't just test my skills as a bartender. They confronted me with bigger questions about self-worth, ethics, and the true meaning of the work I loved. I grew up in the southern suburbs of Atlanta, in a small house with a front porch full of flowers that my mother Emily tended to daily. She was a chef at a local restaurant where she transformed simple ingredients into meals that kept customers coming back. "James," she would say, "when I was young, a good dish doesn't just nourish the body, it touches the heart. Your work should do the same. Do it with love and respect." Those words etched themselves into my mind and led me to bartending, a profession I believe is the perfect blend of art, science, and human connection. My father, Robert, was a retired postal worker who taught me patience and hard work. He often shared stories of long days walking under Georgia's heat, delivering mail to every household, rich or poor. "Work doesn't discriminate," he'd say, "but how you work shows who you are." The lessons from my parents shaped who I became, a white man from a middle-class background who believed that a person's worth is defined by their actions, not by appearances or status. I discovered my passion for bartending as a teenager. At 16, I secretly watched bartending videos online, mesmerized by how bartenders turned bottles into colorful cocktails. I started experimenting in my mother's kitchen, mixing juices, syrups, and even soda water to create my cocktails. She laughed when I spilled an entire bottle of lemonade on the floor, but still encouraged me. "Keep trying, James. Mistakes are how you learn." By 25, I had won first prize in a citywide bartending competition with a cocktail called Georgia Sunset. a bold mix of bourbon fresh peach and a hint of rosemary. That award opened the door to Grand Elite, where I thought I'd come closer to realizing my dream. Working at Grand Elite's bar was a double-edged experience, a source of pride and a test of endurance. The bar was my stage, with its ebony shelves and expensive spirits. I loved the feel of the shaker in my hands, the sound of ice clinking, and the odd looks from customers as I performed pouring techniques. I created new cocktails like Midnight Magnolia, a blend of gin jasmine and passion fruit that guests insisted on photographing before drinking. My reputation spread, and some VIPs even requested to be served by the bartender with the Magnolia. But no matter how hard I worked, Edward Grayson, the hotel owner, never seemed satisfied. Grayson had a way of making people feel small. He frequently appeared at the bar, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. Once, while I was making a Negroni for a guest, Grayson interrupted Carter. "You're taking too long. We serve quickly here, not put on a show." The middle-aged businessman guest gave an awkward chuckle, and I just nodded, masking my frustration. Moments like that made me question, was my talent truly appreciated here? Or was I just another cog in Grayson's machine, used to serve only the guests he deemed worthy? What troubled me more than anything was the discriminatory policy at Grand Elite. I'll never forget the image of a black family being turned away at the front desk, even though they had a prior reservation. The father, dressed sharply in a suit, remained calm, as he was told no rooms were available, while his young daughter looked up at him, confused. I stood behind the bar, gripping a bottle of vermouth, feeling a slow shame creeping in. As a white man, I didn't suffer the injustice myself, but I couldn't ignore it either. Every time it happened, I heard my mother's voice. "Do it with respect." But here respect seemed to be a luxury, reserved for those who met Grayson's standards. Maria, my colleague and server, was the only one who shared my frustration. One evening, as we were cleaning up the bar, Maria said, "James, have you ever thought about leaving this place? It's beautiful, but it's draining our souls." I looked at her, her brown eyes lit with determination, and replied, "I want to stay and prove myself, but I don't know how long I can take it." Maria nodded as if she understood. That conversation, though brief, planted a thought in me. Maybe my dream wasn't at Grand Elite, but somewhere else. Somewhere I could be myself. This chapter is about the career dream that brought me to Grand Elite, and the growing inner conflict I could no longer ignore. But it's also the beginning of a significant shift as I prepare to leave behind the hotel's artificial glamour and find Sarah Thompson and Harmony Bar, where my dream would truly begin. Stay with me as Atlanta reveals its harsh but priceless lessons. Each shift behind the bar at the Grand Elite Hotel was a silent battle within me, James Carter. Standing behind a polished ebony counter, I crafted flawless cocktails, smiled at the guests, and tried to keep the flame of my dream alive, to one day own a bar where everyone, regardless of background or skin color, would be welcomed. But in 2025, in the heart of Atlanta, the glittering facade of Grand Elite couldn't hide an ugly truth. Racial discrimination was openly practiced under the hand of Edward Grayson, the hotel's owner. The months I spent witnessing injustice forced me to ask myself, how much longer could I stay silent? And was my dream worth the cost of my dignity? I'd always taken pride in being a skilled bartender. Every cocktail I created, from the floral elegance of the Midnight Magnolia to the bold bourbon-rich Georgia Sunset, was a story, a way to connect with the guests. But at Grand Elite, I felt trapped. Edward Grayson didn't just control the hotel, he shaped how we were expected to view the world. He required staff to turn away black guests, using excuses like "no vacancy" or "fully booked," and that left a deep ache in me. As a white man, I wasn't the direct target of such injustice, but every time I witnessed it, I felt like I was betraying the values my mother Emily had taught me. Treat everyone with respect, James. One Friday evening, as Atlanta sparkled with city lights and Grand Elite buzzed with guests, I was preparing a Manhattan when I heard raised voices at the reception desk. Peering over, I saw a black woman elegantly dressed in a navy blue business dress, speaking with our receptionist, Sophie. She said, "I booked this room 2 weeks ago. Calm, but firm. Here is the confirmation email." Sophie looked visibly uncomfortable, glancing at our manager, Helen, who was nearby. Helen stepped in, wearing that fake professional smile I had seen far too often. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "There has been a mistake. We are currently fully booked." The woman furrowed her brow, clearly unconvinced. "This is the second time I've been turned away," she said, her voice beginning to shake. "I'm a lawyer. I know my rights." Helen repeated her apology, and eventually the woman walked away. Her eyes filled with disappointment. I returned to the bar, gripping the whiskey bottle, a wave of anger rising in my chest. As Sophie passed by, she whispered, "James, I hate doing that." She seemed so decent. I nodded but couldn't find the words. It wasn't the first time. Just a week earlier, a black family had been turned away with the same excuse, even though I knew dozens of rooms were still available. Each time it happened, I thought of my father, who once delivered mail to every household in Atlanta, no matter who lived there. Work doesn't discriminate, he had told me. But at Grand Elite, the work seemed to serve only the people Grayson deemed worthy. My fellow server, Maria, was the only one bold enough to speak openly about the injustice. As we cleaned up the bar after closing, Maria pulled me aside one night. "James, did you see what happened today?" She asked, her brown eyes burning with outrage. "That woman was a lawyer. She didn't deserve that. Grayson thinks he can do anything because he's rich." I sighed and nodded. "I know, Maria, but what can we do? He owns the place." Maria frowned. "We can choose how we live, James. Aren't you tired of pretending I know I am?" Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I was tired, but I was also afraid of losing my job and giving up the chance to get closer to my dream. But Maria was right. My silence was making me complicit. My inner conflict only deepened when Grayson began targeting me. While I was performing a bartending technique for a group of VIP guests one evening, Grayson entered the bar. He stood with arms crossed, watching me with that cold, judging look. When I finished the Midnight Magnolia and the guests applauded, Grayson cut in. "Carter, do you think you're some star? We're here to serve, not show off." The guests fell silent, and I felt my face flush with heat. I wanted to speak up to say that my cocktails brought in the crowds, but I lowered my head and stayed silent. Later in the staff break room, Maria found me. "James, you can't let him treat you like this forever," she said. "You deserve better than this." Maria wasn't just a co-worker, she became a friend who helped me see myself more clearly. She grew up in a rough part of Atlanta where she had faced discrimination from a young age. She once told me, "I work here to put my brother through college, but I won't let Grayson take away my self-respect." Her strength inspired me and shamed me. I had privileges she didn't. My skin color made me invisible to Grayson's prejudice. But that didn't make me feel better. It made me question, what was I doing here? Was my dream worth staying silent in the face of injustice? One night, as I was wiping down glasses, I overheard Grayson talking to Helen in the corner. "Make sure the bar only serves the right kind of people, Helen. I don't want any mistakes." I knew exactly what he meant by the right kind. I looked at the bottles lining the shelves. Bottles I once took pride in arranging, and suddenly they felt foreign. I thought of my mother and how she welcomed every customer at her restaurant, no matter who they were. I thought of my dream to open a bar where everyone was welcome. And I asked myself, If I stayed here, would I still be the man my mother and father raised me to be? This chapter is about the cracks forming within me as the arrogance and injustice of the grand elite collided with the values I held dear. But it was also a turning point as Maria's words and the scenes I witnessed began to push me toward a difficult decision. Stay with me, as Atlanta teaches me that sometimes you must be willing to let go of what's holding you back to protect a dream. That night, the neon lights of Atlanta seemed to dim before my eyes. James Carter stood behind the bar at the Grand Elite Hotel, absent-mindedly polishing a wine glass, my heart heavy. Months of working under Edward Grayson, witnessing his arrogance and the open racism he practiced, had left me feeling like I was losing myself. In 2025, in the heart of this vibrant city, I realized something harrowing. A dream built on silence in the face of injustice was no dream worth having. That night, a moment would push me past my limit and lead to a decision that would change my life forever. I resigned. It all began on a busy Saturday night. Grand Elite was packed. Laughter, the clink of glasses, and a constant stream of drink orders filled the bar. I heard murmurs near the front desk when I was crafting a Midnight Magnolia, my signature cocktail. I looked up and saw a well-dressed black couple trying to check in. The man in a gray suit spoke politely. "We booked a room last week. Here's the confirmation code." Receptionist Sophie, visibly uneasy, glanced at manager Helen. Helen approached, flashing her all-too-familiar fake smile. "I'm very sorry, sir, and ma'am, for the mistake. The hotel is currently at full capacity." The woman, her natural curls falling gracefully to her shoulders, replied, "We called again this morning to confirm. How can there be a mistake?" But Helen only repeated her apology, and the couple, clearly upset, finally walked away, disappointment written across their faces. I returned to the bar, my blood boiling. It wasn't the first time I'd seen something like this, but it cut deeply into my sense of dignity this time. I thought of my mother, Emily, who welcomed every guest into her restaurant with a genuine smile. I thought of my father, who delivered mail to every home in Atlanta, rich or poor. And I thought of my dream, a bar where everyone was treated equally. But at Grand Elite, I played a part in a system that violated everything I believed. Maria, my fellow server and friend, noticed my unrest. As I wiped another glass, she passed by and whispered, "James, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I shook my head, voice low. "Maria, I can't take it anymore. That couple, they didn't deserve that." Maria nodded, her brown eyes full of sympathy. "I know," she said, "but Grayson's never going to change. If you want change, you'll have to act." Her words, though simple, pierced the fog in my mind. She was right. But taking action meant quitting the job I once thought would bring me closer to my dream. The breaking point came at the end of the shift when Grayson showed up at the bar. He wore a deep navy suit, walking in with the air of a conqueror. A group of VIP guests sat nearby, and I had just finished preparing a Georgia sunset, earning a round of applause. I thought Grayson might be pleased. Instead, he folded his arms and glared at me. Carter said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That cocktail looked like something from a roadside bar. Do you think this is a circus I pay you to serve, not to show off?" The guests fell silent. A few chuckled awkwardly. My face flushed with rage. The cocktails brought the guests in, but I just bowed my head, gripping the bourbon bottle tightly. After he left, I sat in the employee break room, head spinning. Maria found me and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "James, don't let him make you feel small," she said. "You're a great bartender. You deserve respect." I looked at her, my voice shaking. "Maria, I can't stay here. I don't want to be part of this anymore." She smiled, though her eyes burned with determination. "Then leave, James. You'll find somewhere better. I believe in you." Her words were like fire, igniting the courage I had suppressed for too long. That night, I wrote my resignation. I typed it out on my phone, every word, like a blade cutting the cord that tied me to Grand Elite. The next morning, I handed it to Helen in her office. She frowned, clearly surprised. "James, are you sure?" she asked. "You're one of our best bartenders." I nodded, voice steady. "I'm sure. I can't keep working in a place that goes against what I believe in." Helen sighed, but didn't try to convince me to stay. That afternoon, Grayson summoned me to his office. He sat behind a massive wooden desk, staring at me with disdain. "Carter, who do you think you are resigning like this?" he said coldly. "I can replace you in a heartbeat. You'll regret leaving Grand Elite." I looked him straight in the eye, no longer afraid. "You may find someone else, sir," I replied. "But I won't regret this. I want to work somewhere I can be proud of who I am." Grayson scoffed and waved me off as though I wasn't worth his time. I turned and walked away, my heart lighter, though the future ahead felt uncertain. As I packed my things behind the bar, Maria hugged me tightly. "James, you did it," she said, her eyes shining. "Find a place that deserves you." "Okay?" I smiled, feeling a spark of hope. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I had made the right choice. Stepping out of Grand Elite, I looked up at the Atlanta skyline, the neon lights still glowing brightly. I thought of my dream, a bar where everyone was welcome. And I told myself this journey is only just beginning. This chapter is the story of the moment I broke free from Grand Elite's chains, reclaimed my self-respect, and opened a path to something new. But it's also the prelude to a fateful encounter with Sarah Thompson, who would teach me the true meaning of humility. Stay with me as Atlanta leads me toward where my dream truly belongs. Leaving Grand Elite. James Carter felt as though I had cast off an invisible weight. Atlanta in 2025 still shimmered with neon lights, but for the first time in months, I looked at the city with a sense of freedom. Resigning wasn't just a rebellion against Edward Grayson's arrogance and racism. It was a promise to myself. I would find a place where my dream of opening a bar, a place where everyone was welcome, could become a reality. A few weeks later, I walked into Harmony, a small yet warm bar in East Atlanta, and met Sarah Thompson, the Black woman who would teach me the true meaning of humility and leadership. Harmony was tucked away between fashion boutiques and busy cafes on a bustling street. The bar wasn't flashy from the outside. A wooden sign carved with the name Harmony glowed softly in warm light, and a few green potted plants lined the entrance. But as I pushed open the door, I felt an immediate difference. The air inside was warm, filled with laughter, soft jazz music, and the scent of fruit-infused cocktails. Unlike the cold extravagance of Grand Elite, Harmony radiated a living, breathing spirit, as if every corner whispered a story. I heard about Harmony through a fellow bartender who mentioned they were hiring. "James, this place is different," he said. "The owner is fantastic. She treats everyone like family." I applied with hesitation, afraid after Grand Elite that I'd end up in another place obsessed with profit over people. But when I was invited for an interview, my doubts disappeared. The person interviewing me was Sarah Thompson, the owner of Harmony. Around 40, Sarah had short, curly hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that instantly welcomed you. She wore a simple white shirt, nothing showy, though I would later learn she was wealthy enough to own an entire chain of restaurants. "James, I heard you make some special cocktails." Sarah said, her tone friendly yet sharp with insight. "But at Harmony, we don't just serve drinks. We create a space where people feel like they belong. Can you do that?" I nodded, feeling a rare sense of honesty in the air. "I want to try, ma'am," I replied. She smiled. "Call me Sarah." and do what you always do with heart. A few days later, I got the call I was officially a bartender at Harmony. Working at Harmony was a completely different experience. The bar had 17 employees, from bartenders and servers to the cleaning staff. And what surprised me most was their diversity: white, black, Latinx, Asian. No one was treated differently. Sarah treated everyone equally, calling them by name and listening to their ideas. One morning I saw her arrive early, personally wiping down the bar and arranging bottles. "Sarah, you don't need to do this," I joked. "You're the owner." She laughed. "James, I grew up poor in Atlanta. My mom washed dishes to raise me. These tasks don't make me smaller. They remind me where I come from." Sarah's humility was what I admired most. Even though she could be vacationing at a luxury resort, she chose to stay at Harmony, working alongside her team, greeting guests, and even cleaning up when the bar was packed. One evening, when a customer spilled their cocktail on the floor, Sarah immediately grabbed a towel and cleaned it with a smile. "No worries, I've got it," she said. The customer, a middle-aged man, apologized awkwardly, but Sarah patted his shoulder. "It's just a drink. Enjoy your night." At that moment, I realized Sarah wasn't just the owner of Harmony. She was its heart. I quickly found my rhythm there. My co-workers, like Luis, a Mexican server with an endless sense of humor, and Aisha, a black bartender, who sang along with the jazz music, made me feel at home. Unlike Grand Elite, where staff competed for Grayson's approval, Harmony was where people lifted each other. I experimented with a new cocktail using burnt orange and cinnamon one night. Aisha took a sip and shouted, "James, this needs to go on the menu." Sarah nearby nodded. "Do it, James. I trust you." That kind of trust, I had never felt it at Grand Elite. But not everything was perfect. I still carried scars from my time at Grand Elite: self-doubt and fear of failure. One night during a quiet shift, I opened up to Sarah. "I used to think Grand Elite would bring me closer to my dream," I said. "But I was wrong. I'm afraid I'll fail here too." Sarah looked at me, her gaze gentle but steady. "James, your dream isn't about where you work. It's about how you live. At Harmony, we're not chasing fame. We're creating joy and connection. Just be yourself, that's enough." Her words were like a fresh breeze, clearing away the lingering fog inside me. Harmony wasn't just a workplace. It was where I rediscovered belief in my dream. Every cocktail I poured and every smile I received from a guest brought me one step closer to the bar I had always imagined. But I didn't know then that one day the past from Grand Elite would return in the form of Edward Grayson and put Sarah and me through an unexpected trial. This chapter is the story of my new beginning at Harmony, where I found freedom and learned the meaning of humility from Sarah Thompson. But it's also the prelude to a reckoning where Atlanta's lights would again illuminate hard lessons about pride and dignity. Stay with me. Every day working at Harmony Bar gave me, James Carter, a renewed sense of life. Atlanta in 2025, with its bustling streets and glowing neon lights, felt closer, warmer, and more human as I stood behind that bar. But what made Harmony truly special wasn't the cocktails I made. It was Sarah Thompson, the black woman who owned the place. Sarah wasn't just the owner, she was the heart and soul of Harmony. Through the days I worked beside her, I learned that leadership wasn't about power or prestige. It was about humility, compassion, and the ability to inspire others to become their best versions. Sarah Thompson, around 40, was the kind of woman who drew attention wherever she went. Her short curls framed her face. Her warm brown eyes seemed to speak, and her smile made you feel instantly welcome. But it wasn't her appearance that made Sarah stand out. It was how she lived. Though wealthy enough to own a chain of restaurants or vacation in luxury, she remained at Harmony, working alongside her staff, cleaning the bar and serving guests. She wore simple clothes, often a white shirt and jeans, and called everyone by name, from staff to regular customers. That humility made me, a bartender once belittled at Grand Elite, feel genuinely respected. I still remember the first morning I saw Sarah at work. I had arrived early to prep the bar, only to find her already there, carefully organizing bottles and polishing glasses. "Sarah, let me do that," I said, slightly embarrassed to see the owner doing what at Grand Elite was low-level work. Sarah laughed warmly. "James, I like doing this. It reminds me that there's no such thing as a small job, only how we do it." I stood there with a cloth thinking about Edward Grayson, who looked down on staff like servants. Sarah, in contrast, was the embodiment of a life philosophy I had never encountered before. One quiet afternoon, I had a chance to talk to Sarah. We sat at the bar. I made her a burnt orange mocktail, and she told me about her past. Sarah had grown up poor on the west side of Atlanta, where her mother Clara worked day and night, washing dishes and cleaning homes to raise 3 daughters. Sarah said, "My mother was the strongest person I've ever known, eyes distant. She taught me that a person's worth isn't in what they own, but in how they treat others. Even when we had nothing, she'd say, 'Sarah, you may not have much, but you can always give kindness.'" Those words carried Sarah through the hard years, from waiting tables to opening Harmony, a place she envisioned as a second home for anyone who walked in. I once asked Sarah why she didn't just retire and enjoy the wealth she had earned. She smiled softly, sipping her mocktail. "James, money doesn't make me happy. Working here, seeing people smile, hearing their stories, that's what makes me feel alive. Harmony isn't just a bar. It's my way of honoring my mother's promise to create a space without judgment where everyone is treated like family." Her words struck something profound in me. I thought of my dream, a bar where everyone was welcome. Sarah wasn't just living that dream, she inspired me to believe mine was still possible. Sarah's leadership style made Harmony different from wherever I'd ever worked. She never barked orders. She led by example. One night when the bar was packed, a server named Luis accidentally dropped a tray of drinks. Glasses shattered, heads turned. I expected him to be scolded just like Grayson would have done to me. But Sarah, standing nearby, just smiled, grabbed a broom, and said, "It's all right. Just be more careful next time." She turned to the guests and joked, "Just a bit of extra percussion for tonight's music." The room burst into laughter. Luis, still embarrassed, looked at her with gratitude. At that moment, I realized that Sarah wasn't just managing a bar. She was building a community. I also learned from how she interacted with customers. One evening, a white man, probably a corporate type, walked in, his face tense with stress. He ordered a whiskey and sat silently in a corner. Sarah noticed. She approached him gently. "Long day. Tell me about it." Within minutes, the man was laughing, sharing stories about work pressure. When he left a huge tip and said, "Thank you. I feel so much better now." Sarah wasn't selling drinks. She was offering care, something Grand Elite never understood. But Sarah wasn't flawless. One night, as we cleaned up after closing, I asked Sarah, "Do you ever get tired of always having to be strong?" She paused, then looked at me with raw honesty. "Of course, James. There are days I want to give up. But then I remember my mother and the people who believe in me. They're the reason I keep going." Her vulnerability made me respect her even more. Sarah wasn't just a leader. She was a human being with dreams, fears, and courage. Under Sarah's guidance, Harmony began drawing more and more customers. People came for the drinks and the warm atmosphere she cultivated. But what none of us saw coming was that this growing reputation would soon attract someone from my past, Edward Grayson. And when he walked into Harmony, everything I'd learned from Sarah would be put to the ultimate test. This chapter is about Sarah Thompson, the quiet leader who changed how I saw work and life. But it's also the beginning of a fateful confrontation when past and present collide under Atlanta's lights. Stay with me. Atlanta in 2025, with its dazzling lights and non-stop rhythm, had become the stage for a new phenomenon: Harmony Bar. James Carter once thought leaving the Grand Elite Hotel was a gamble, but just a few months at Harmony made it clear I had found a place that nourished my professional dreams and restored my belief in people. Under the leadership of Sarah Thompson, Harmony was more than a bar. It had become a symbol of equality and community. But as the bar's reputation spread across the city, I never imagined that the past I left behind at Grand Elite, in the form of Edward Grayson, was quietly approaching, bringing a test that Sarah and I would have to face together. Tucked humbly into a busy street in East Atlanta, Harmony had become a favorite destination for all kinds of people. The wooden sign engraved with the word Harmony glowed gently, welcoming guests from all walks of life: college students with tight budgets, business executives in tailored suits, street performers and families seeking a relaxing night out. Inside, the air was always filled with laughter, soft jazz melodies, and the inviting aroma of handcrafted cocktails. Unlike the cold opulence of Grand Elite, Harmony exuded authentic warmth. It felt like home, a place everyone wanted to return to. Flashy marketing campaigns didn't drive Harmony's popularity. It came from how Sarah ran the place. She always put people first. One night, while preparing a Georgia sunset for a regular, I watched Sarah standing at the entrance, greeting each guest by name. "Hey Mia, how's your day?" she asked a young woman, or "Mr. Thomas," your usual whiskey to an elderly gentleman. Customers didn't return for the drinks, but to feel seen and valued. I once overheard a guest whisper to their friend, "I feel like I matter here, even if I'm just a regular person." I contributed to Harmony's growth too. Cocktails I created became house favorites, like the Midnight Magnolia, and a new drink I called Harmony Glow rum, caramelized pineapple, and a hint of ginger. Sarah encouraged experimentation, and whenever I pitched a new idea, she always listened. "James, you've got real talent," she once said, "but I love how you make customers smile." Her trust gave me confidence, and soon, Harmony wasn't just where I worked, it was where I belonged. The staff was also a vital part of Harmony's magic. Aisha, the black bartender, with a voice that could melt the most stubborn guest, often helped me test out new recipes. Luis, the Mexican server, kept everyone laughing with his goofy jokes. Once, when I accidentally spilled an entire bottle of syrup, Luis rushed over with a mop and shouted, "James, are you trying to turn the floor into one giant cocktail?" The whole bar burst into laughter, and Sarah nearby shook her head with a smile. That kind of camaraderie, the kind Grand Elite never had, made every shift at Harmony feel like a joy, not a job. But Harmony's appeal wasn't just the atmosphere. Customers began posting about the bar on social media, sharing check-in photos and glowing 5-star reviews. A local article even called Harmony Atlanta's hidden gem, praising its inclusive space and inventive drinks. Sarah, though proud, remained humble. During a staff meeting, she said, "We're not doing this for fame. We do it to bring people joy. Let's keep that in our hearts." Her words reminded me of my mother, Emily, who always believed that a good job touches people's hearts. One evening, as I was cleaning up the bar after closing, a familiar face appeared: Maria, my former co-worker from Grand Elite. She rushed in and hugged me tightly. "James, I've heard about Harmony everywhere," she exclaimed. "Atlanta is obsessed with this place." I laughed, poured her a Harmony Glow, and asked how things were at Grand Elite. Maria's expression dimmed. "It's getting worse. Grayson's losing customers, and he's jealous of Harmony. I heard he'd mentioned this bar to some friends, and not in a flattering way." Her words stirred a flicker of concern. I told Sarah, but she just smiled calmly. "Let them talk, James. We'll keep doing what we do best, that's enough. Her composure reassured me. But deep down, I sensed a storm brewing. With popularity came new challenges. During a hectic shift, a group of intoxicated guests argued loudly over their bill one night. I was about to call security, but Sarah stepped in calmly. "Gentlemen, let's talk. We can figure this out." Within minutes, she had them laughing, apologizing, and walking out peacefully. When I asked her how she did it, Sarah shrugged. "James, sometimes people need to be heard." That moment only deepened my respect for her. Sarah wasn't just a leader, she could turn conflict into connection. I didn't know that Harmony's rising star had caught the attention of someone I hoped never to see again. Edward Grayson. And when he finally walked through the doors of Harmony, carrying the same arrogance and prejudice I had once fled, everything I had learned from Sarah would be put to the test I could never have predicted. This chapter is the story of Harmony's rise, where I rediscovered the real meaning of work and community. But it's also a prelude to a destined confrontation where Atlanta's lights would illuminate the stark contrast between pride and humility. Stay with me. That night, Harmony glowed brighter than ever. I, James Carter, stood behind the bar, shaker in hand, immersed in the sound of jazz and the laughter of our guests. Atlanta in 2025, with its neon lights and non-stop pulse, seemed to converge in this little bar. Harmony was hosting a special night, the official introduction of a new bartender, me. After a few months of working here, I had become an integral part of the team. But the air froze when the bar door swung open, and Edward Grayson, my former boss from the Grand Elite Hotel, stepped inside. His arrogance and prejudice, things I thought I had escaped, now stood before me, threatening the peace we had built at Harmony. The evening had begun like a dream. The bar was packed, young groups snapping photos of their Harmony Glow cocktails, couples sipping drinks under soft golden lights. Sarah Thompson, the owner, floated through the room, greeting guests with her warm smile, pausing now and then to chat with staff. She wore a simple white shirt, her short curls glowing under the light, radiating quiet confidence and humility. I had just finished a midnight magnolia for a regular earning applause when Sarah gently patted my shoulder. "You're doing great, James," she said, her eyes shining. "Tonight's your night." I smiled, proud but anxious. It was my first formal spotlight, and I wanted everything to go perfectly. And then Grayson walked in. He appeared exactly as I remembered, tall, silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. He scanned the bar with sharp eyes, like he was appraising merchandise. Behind the bar, I tightened my grip on a whiskey bottle, heart pounding. He didn't recognize me at first. Maybe due to the lighting, or perhaps because he never really saw me at Grand Elite. He reached a VIP table near the center and motioned to Luis, our server. "Bring me a scotch, the best you've got," he said loudly enough for a few customers to turn their heads. I forced myself to stay calm, continuing to mix drinks, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. Maria's warning echoed in my mind. Grayson was jealous of Harmony's success, but why was he here to mock us, to cause trouble? I glanced at Sarah, chatting in the corner with a guest. She hadn't noticed him yet, and I hoped it would all pass quietly. But that hope shattered when Grayson stood up after a few sips of scotch and walked toward the bar, his gaze landing on Sarah. Sarah, as always, was seated quietly in her corner, watching the bar with a serene smile. Wearing her white shirt, she looked like any other team member. No one would guess she was the owner. Grayson smirked, pointed at her, and shouted loud enough for the entire bar to hear. "Hey, bartender, I'll buy a drink for everyone in the room, except that black girl in the corner." Silence. Conversation stopped. Even the jazz music seemed to fade. I froze mid-shake. Luis nearby stared at me in shock. Aisha, our fellow bartender, leaned over and whispered, "Did he say what I think he said?" I looked at Sarah, waiting for her reaction. I expected fury, a confrontation, but she looked up calm and steady and gave me a slight nod as if to say, "Go ahead." I didn't understand why she agreed, but her composure grounded me. So I followed through, pouring and serving drinks to everyone in the bar, except Sarah, as Grayson had commanded. Guests, though visibly uncomfortable, accepted the drinks. But the air had grown heavy. Some guests murmured, and others glared at Grayson with disdain. When I brought the last drink to a table near Sarah, I saw her smile, gently look straight at Grayson and say, "Thank you." Grayson, sipping his scotch, froze. He had expected outrage. But Sarah's calm, graceful, disarming response caught him off guard. Around the room, customers began whispering louder. Some chuckled. From behind the bar, I watched in awe. Sarah hadn't just kept her dignity, she had turned his insult into a moment of embarrassment for him. But Grayson wasn't done. He stood again, pulled out a thick leather wallet, and shouted once more, "Fine, then I'll buy wine and food for everyone except her in the bar." He pointed at Sarah, his eyes daring her to react. The bar fell silent again. All eyes turned to Sarah. I looked at her, expecting a refusal, but again she nodded and gestured for me to continue. I obeyed, though my chest tightened. Luis and Aisha helped me serve, whispering, "James, this isn't right. What is Sarah thinking?" As the wine and food were served, Sarah sat calmly, receiving nothing. She looked at Grayson and smiled once more. "Thank you again," she said softly. Grayson's face turned crimson. He slammed his hand on the table. "Is she crazy?" He barked, his voice shaking with anger. The guests weren't laughing anymore. They stared at him with contempt. Behind the bar, my heart thudded. Something was about to break. And yet Sarah remained unwavering, doing something none of us understood. But deep down, I knew this moment would change everything. This chapter is the story of a collision: arrogance versus humility, as Grayson brought his prejudice into harmony, only to be met by Sarah's quiet strength. But it's also a prelude to revelation, as the lights of Atlanta are about to expose the truth of who Sarah is. Stay with me. The atmosphere at Harmony, usually filled with laughter and jazz, now hung heavy, like the air before a storm. James Carter stood behind the bar, my hand trembling slightly as I poured drinks, eyes locked on Edward Grayson. Atlanta, in 2025, with all its neon splendor, seemed to be witnessing a showdown unlike any other. Grayson, my former boss at the Grand Elite Hotel, had just humiliated Sarah Thompson, the owner of Harmony, by announcing he would buy drinks for everyone in the bar, except her, simply because of her skin color. Sarah smiled and said thank you with astounding composure, leaving Grayson visibly rattled. But he didn't stop there. That night, he pushed his arrogance even further, repeating the challenge to break Sarah's calm, not knowing he was digging his grave. After his first declaration, Grayson returned to his VIP table, sipping scotch with a smug, challenging look. Around the bar, customers began whispering. Some shook their heads. Others glanced at Sarah with worry. Behind the bar, my heart pounded. Grayson's insult wasn't just directed at Sarah. It struck at the very spirit of Harmony, a place where everyone was treated as equals. I glanced toward Sarah, seated quietly in her corner, wearing her signature white shirt, calm as ever. She didn't rise. She didn't scowl. She gave me a slight nod as if to say, "Keep going." I didn't understand why she allowed it, but the trust in her eyes anchored me. I resumed serving drinks, trying to keep a professional smile, but my unease grew. Luis, our Mexican server, whispered, "What does he think he's doing? Sarah doesn't deserve this." Aisha, the black bartender beside me, muttered, "I want to throw a drink in his face." But both of them kept looking towards Sarah, waiting for her signal. The awkward yet cooperative customers accepted their drinks, but the vibe had shifted. The jazz felt muted beneath the rising tension. When I brought the last drink to a table near Sarah, she turned toward Grayson and said clear and poised, "Thank you, sir." Grayson froze. He expected rage. He wanted her to crack. But Sarah's calm smile disarmed him, stripped him of the control he thought he had. But Grayson wasn't done. He stood again, pulled out his thick leather wallet, and shouted, his voice slicing through the music. "Fine. I'll pay for wine and food. For the entire bar this time. Except her." He pointed squarely at Sarah, his tone dripping with disdain. Silence. Complete and deafening. Customers stopped mid-sip. I felt a surge of heat in my chest, tempted to leap over the bar and confront him. But Sarah, still seated, gave another subtle nod. "Continue." I looked at her eyes full of questions. Why? Why let him keep going? But her stillness, like a mountain unmoved by storm, compelled me forward. I turned to Luis and Aisha. "Help me," I said quietly. They nodded, both uneasy. We began serving wine and plates of Harmony's signature tapas. Some guests accepted them reluctantly. Others shook their heads, visibly upset. A middle-aged woman whispered, "Who does he think he is?" A young man took a photo of Grayson and posted it with the caption, "Racism at Harmony." Disgusting. I glanced at Sarah, hoping she'd stand, say something, but she remained still, hands clasped, gaze locked on Grayson. When the final bottle of wine was delivered, I brought it to a table near Sarah. She smiled again and said, "Thank you once again." Her voice was gentle but powerful enough that the entire bar turned toward her. Grayson's face turned red. He slammed his hand on the table. "Is she insane? I'm buying out the whole bar, and she sits there thanking me. What is she trying to prove?" The crowd stopped being silent. An older man stood up and called out, "You should be ashamed of yourself." A group of young patrons whistled mockingly, not used to being challenged. Grayson scanned the room with a growing look of panic. Behind the bar, my heart was hammering. I was torn between worry and awe. Sarah hadn't just stayed composed, she was mastering the moment without ever raising her voice. I remembered her words. Sometimes people need to be heard. But tonight she wasn't listening. She was letting Grayson expose himself. Aisha leaned close and whispered, "She knows exactly what she's doing. He's unraveling." Luis nodded. "I've never seen anything like this." Grayson, pale with rage, stomped toward the bar and jabbed a finger at me. "You bartender, what's wrong with her? Who does she think she is, smiling at me like that?" I drew a deep breath, preparing to answer. But Sarah stood. She approached the bar, calm and radiant, and looked him in the eye. "I'm not thinking anything, sir," she said. "I'm simply thanking you for your generosity." Grayson sneered, but there was confusion behind his arrogance. Then, in a lower tone, he turned to me and said, "Call your manager. I have a business proposal. This place could go further if it partnered with me." Those words hit me like a blow. This was the moment. I knew whatever happened next would change everything. This chapter is the story of a repeating test, as Grayson pushes his arrogance to the limit, only to face Sarah's silent strength. But it's also the final step, before the truth is revealed, as the lights of Atlanta prepare to shine on Sarah's hidden identity. Stay with me. The air in Harmony was thick, like the moment just before a storm breaks. James Carter stood behind the bar, fingers clenched tightly around a bottle of whiskey, heart pounding. In 2025, glowing with neon lights, Atlanta seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for a moment of destiny. Edward Grayson, my former boss at the Grand Elite Hotel, had just pushed his arrogance and racism to the limit, offering to pay for food and drinks for the entire bar. Except for Sarah Thompson, simply because she was black. Sarah, calm in a way that stunned everyone, smiled and thanked him, driving Grayson into a rage. But when he demanded to see the manager to propose a business alliance, I knew the truth was about to be revealed, and everything was about to change. Grayson stood in front of the bar, voice booming, eyes gleaming with disdain. "Hey, bartender, call the manager out here now. I have a proposal that'll turn Harmony into something worthy. An alliance with me. Edward Grayson is an opportunity anyone would kill for." Guests, already fed up with his behavior, murmured louder now. Someone whispered, "Who does he think he is?" Another scoffed, "Harmony doesn't need people like him." I looked at Grayson, feeling a mix of anger and anticipation. He didn't know that the black woman he had just humiliated was the very person he was demanding to meet. I took a deep breath, ready to speak. But Sarah stood up. She walked calmly from her corner toward the bar, dressed simply in her white shirt, her short curls glinting under the soft lights. Every eye in the bar turned to her. Sarah stopped just in front of Grayson, her gaze steady, unshaken, like a mountain unmoved by storm. I glanced at Luis and Aisha, standing nearby. Luis whispered, "This is about to get good." Aisha nodded, eyes glowing. The room went still. Even the jazz seemed to lower itself in reverence. Grayson, still unaware, scoffed, "Lady, I'm not talking to you. I want the manager." "Or do you think you're qualified to butt into business?" He turned to me, sneering. "You bartender. Is she crazy? Smiling and thanking me like that. Get whoever's in charge now." I looked at Sarah. She nodded slightly. That was my cue. I cleared my throat and looked Grayson dead in the eye. "Sir, I said clearly she's not crazy. She's Sarah Thompson, the owner of Harmony." The entire bar erupted. Grayson froze, jaw-slack eyes darting between me and Sarah. Laughter exploded across the room. Some guests applauded. Others whistled. An older man shouted, "It serves you right." A young woman raised her phone to record and screamed, "This is gold." Grayson, face pale, stunned, stumbled back as if slapped. He stared at Sarah, trying to form words. You're the owner. That's impossible." Sarah smiled. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "That's right, Mr. Grayson. I'm the owner of Harmony. And I thank you for giving everyone a night they won't forget." More cheers and applause swept through the room. Luis shouted, "Sarah, you're amazing." Aisha hugged me and whispered, "I knew she'd handle it." Customers, many of whom had accepted Grayson's free drinks, now raised their glasses to Sarah. A middle-aged woman called out, "Ms. Thompson, you're the pride of Atlanta." Grayson stood in the middle of it all, surrounded, exposed, undone. He tried to maintain his composure, but his panicked eyes gave him away. He pointed at Sarah, voice trembling. You think you've won? Harmony is nothing compared to my grand elite." Sarah stepped forward, locking eyes with him. She said, "Mr. Grayson is calm, but sharp. Harmony doesn't need to compare itself to anyone. We welcome everyone, no matter who they are. You should learn that before talking about business partnerships." Her words sliced through his pride like a knife. The bar erupted again in applause. Some chanted, "Sarah, Sarah." Grayson muttered something under his breath, red-faced and shaking, then turned and hurried toward the door. But before he could leave, Sarah called after him, her voice firm but kind. "Mr. Grayson, next time you stop by, I'll buy you a drink on the house. Everyone's welcome here." The bar exploded in laughter and cheers. Grayson didn't look back. He shoved the door open and vanished into the neon night of Atlanta. I stood behind the bar, my heart still racing, a mix of relief and pride flooding me. Sarah turned to me and smiled. "James, you did great." I shook my head laughing. Sarah, this was your stage tonight. She patted my shoulder and returned to her work as if it had been another moment. But I knew it was a moment I'd never forget, and neither would anyone else in Harmony that night. Guests kept raising glasses, buzzing about what had just happened. Some approached the bar to thank me and ask about Sarah. She's incredible, a young woman said. I'm telling everyone I know about this place. I looked over at Sarah, now chatting casually with a guest in the corner, and thought about something she once told me. A dream isn't about where you work, but how you live. That night, Sarah didn't just defend Harmony. She protected my dream too. A dream of a place where everyone is treated with respect. This chapter is the story of truth revealed, where Grayson's pride collapsed before Sarah's quiet power. But it's also the final preparation before one last lesson as the lights of Atlanta prepare to illuminate the true meaning of humility. Stay with me. That night at Harmony, as Edward Grayson left under the weight of public ridicule, I, James Carter, felt a new breeze blow through my soul. Atlanta, in 2025, lit by neon lights, brighter than ever, felt transformed. The moment Sarah Thompson, a black woman and owner of Harmony, revealed her identity to Grayson, wasn't just a victory of humility over arrogance. It was the most profound lesson I had ever received. From a bartender fleeing the discrimination of the grand elite, I had found in Harmony not just a job, but a reason to live with dignity and with respect for all people. After Grayson's hurried exit, Harmony seemed to awaken. Jazz music resumed. Laughter and conversation filled the space again. Customers clinked glasses and ordered more Harmony Glows and Midnight Magnolias. Some approached the bar, shook my hand, and thanked Sarah for turning the evening into an unforgettable memory. A young woman holding her phone laughed out loud. The video I took of him is going viral. Everyone in Atlanta needs to know about Sarah. I looked over at Sarah, speaking with a guest in the corner. Dressed in her simple white shirt, she wasn't seeking applause. But everyone in the bar, from staff to guests, looked at her with profound respect. I walked over, still reeling from everything that had happened. Sarah, how did you stay so calm? I asked. She smiled, her warm brown eyes steady. James, my mother used to say, don't let someone else's smallness make you forget who you are. Grayson wanted me to get angry, but I chose to let him reveal his truth. Her words reminded me of my mother, Emily, who always taught me to treat people with dignity. Sarah hadn't just won over Grayson. She had lived the values I'd always admired and made them real. That night, after closing the staff, Luis, Aisha, and the rest of us sat at the bar sharing a cocktail. Luis, always the jokester, laughed. James, do you think Grayson will ever dare to come back? I'd love to see his face again. Aisha shook her head with a grin. He's done. Sarah gave him a lesson he'll never forget. I looked at Sarah quietly wiping down the bar like she always did, and felt deeply grateful. She wasn't just a bar owner. She was a leader who lifted others, rather than holding them down. In the following days, Harmony became the center of attention in Atlanta. The post about Grayson's outburst went viral, drawing thousands of shares. Local news outlets called Sarah the Flame of Atlanta, praising her for standing up to racism with calm and wisdom. Customers poured in not just for the drinks, but to meet Sarah, to feel what it's like to be welcomed without judgment. I overheard a guest say to her friend, "In here, I don't feel like a stranger. Harmony feels like home." As for Grayson, rumors spread quickly. I heard from Maria, my old co-worker at Grand Elite, that his hotel was losing business. After what happened at Harmony, she said that his reputation tanked. He tried to sell the hotel, but no one was buying. Last I heard, he left Atlanta. I wasn't surprised. His arrogance and prejudice had dug his grave exactly as Sarah had allowed him to do. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad for a man who had everything but valued nothing real. Harmony thrived, and so did I. I began working closely with Sarah, proposing new cocktail ideas and organizing live music nights. Sarah patted my shoulder one evening as I made a Georgia sunset for a guest. "James, you've become an essential part of Harmony," she said. "Have you thought about opening a bar of your own?" I laughed and shook my head. "Maybe one day, Sarah. But right now, I want to be here learning from you." She nodded, her eyes glowing. "Keep dreaming big, James. I believe in you." After the Grayson incident, I vowed to live differently. I didn't just want to be a good bartender. I wanted to be like Sarah, who used kindness and humility to create change. Every cocktail I made and every smile I earned from a customer brought me one step closer to my dream, a bar where everyone is treated like family. Harmony had taught me that a dream isn't just a destination. It's a journey rooted in staying true to what you believe in. Atlanta, its vibrant streets and lights that never dim, had witnessed my story, Sarah's and Harmony's. But the story doesn't end here. It lives on in every person who walks through Harmony's doors, in every glass lifted high, and in every lesson of dignity and humility we choose to share. I looked out the window, neon lights reflecting on the glass, and whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." This chapter is the story of an unforgettable lesson, where arrogance fell and humility prevailed. But it's also a promise for the future, where my dream and Harmonies will continue to shine under the lights of Atlanta.